Whether you're a faithful, long-time student of the Scriptures or a wide-eyed newcomer to the exciting world of biblical studies, I'm confident that the study session on which you're about to embark will have a deep and lasting impact on your life. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim LaHaye.
And I'm David Noebel. Welcome to our companion study of Mind Siege, the battle for truth in the new millennium. It's a title that some may label as a little futuristic or even over the top. After all, you may be thinking, I'm not in a battle. Life's pretty predictable these days. Or, no one's after my mind, maybe my money or my time, but certainly not my mind. Well, we beg to differ.
During 6 intriguing sessions, our mission is to do a little reconnaissance work, if you will, to expose the enemy and all its dangerous subtleties and thereby give you, the Christian foot soldier, powerful ammunition to defeat a very real and active enemy, the one that threatens us all.
The conflict is one that takes us as far back as we can go in recorded history. The first battlefield was the Garden of Eden, and the first casualties were Adam and Eve. Certainly human beings have always been aware that life is a battle between good and evil.
The principal question is, in this conflict, who will control your mind, God or Satan? Every day we must decide whether we will follow the wisdom of God or the wisdom of man, with tangible consequences resulting from each decision. Make no mistake, the threat is real and the battle is on. Our hope is that the truths presented in this series will provide Christians of all ages with the weapons necessary to wage a battle intelligently, strategically, and most of all, prayerfully.
Today, our generation speaks of this battle between good and evil as biblical truth versus secular humanism. In session number 1, you'll discover how secularist thinking differs from Christ-centered thinking in the arenas of sociology, psychology, biology, ethics, and philosophy.
What is the nature of the universe? Is all that exists material, or are there immaterial things such as angels and human spirits? Are faith and reason opposed to each other? How do we know things? These are some of the primary questions of philosophy.
The Marxist-Leninist and secular humanist worldviews deny the existence of anything non-material. Philosophical naturalism is the belief that only nature, the material world, exists.
I like to describe the naturalistic worldview in terms of a closed box, where the naturalist believes that if anything exists whatsoever, it exists inside of the natural order, the physical universe, and that there is nothing that exists outside of that box, and that means that there is no God.
New Agers, on the other hand, believe that everything is God and that nature is actually a manifestation of the divine. This philosophical belief is known as non-naturalism.
Naturalism holds that only the physical world exists. There are no angels, there's no God, there's no human spirituality. But in contrast to that, non-naturalism holds that everything is in essence spiritual. And this follows logically from pantheism, because if God is everything and everything is God, then nothing is simply or merely natural.
In contrast to both philosophical naturalism and non-naturalism, biblical Christian philosophy holds to supernaturalism. Christians believe that the material world is real, but they also believe in created things that surpass the physical universe, such as the soul, angels, and miracles.
Christianity is a supernatural religion, and all that means is, it has nothing to do with ghosts and so on, that there is a reality that exists outside of the box that is the sum total of reality for a naturalist.
Are ethics changing, or are they absolute? Do people invent their ethics, or are the standards for right and wrong things to be discovered? How can people tell the difference between right and wrong, good and evil? Are there any standards? Most humanistic ethics advocate some form of relativistic ethics. Whether invented by the individual or by the oppressed classes, they can be altered as the situations demand. Biblical Christian ethics, however, are absolute, grounded in the character of God.
I think that we cannot truly be good without God, because in the absence of God, good and evil as such do not exist. So without God, we cannot be good, but neither can we be evil without God. In the absence of God, everything is relative. Moral values are just expressions of personal taste, like I like vanilla, and somebody else says, well, I like chocolate. In the same way, someone says, well, I like love and mercy and compassion. Another person might say, well, I like sadism and cruelty and hurting people. And neither one is right or wrong. It's just an expression of personal taste.
The revealed ethical order can be the only true source of morality. Moral values are discovered, not invented by humans. C.S. Lewis, the famous apologist and writer, wrote, "The human mind has no more power of inventing a new value than of imagining a new primary color, or, indeed, of creating a new sun and a new sky for it to move in." Christian ethics are grounded in the character of God and are revealed in both general and special revelation, biblical law and natural law. The biblical worldview says that because humans were created in God's image, they have God's law built into their consciences. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 2:15 that all human beings have the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience. Perhaps no other aspect of Christianity has come under greater attack in recent years than its view of origins.
Wherever you turn, in the school systems, on television, on our discovery and learning channels, even on our history channels, there's just a great amount of evolution being presented as scientific fact. Evolution today is more than science, I can tell you that. In fact, evolution is not even a science, it's a philosophy of science.
Evolutionary theory faces problems in every area. It's pretty well known that it doesn't fit the fossil record. The fossil record does not show this pattern of slow, gradual, step-by-step change from one kind of thing into another. It shows variation within the type. Evolutionary naturalism, the Darwinian kind of evolution, doesn't fit the genetic evidence. When you try to test it, you find you can't make the big changes. You just produce birth defects when you induce mutations in organisms. It doesn't face the molecular evidence. Michael Behe has shown how molecular structures are irreducibly complex. You can't build them up by a blind, step-by-step process. So if you go from one area to another, you see it's nothing but problems and evasions, you see, to try to answer the problems. And you go to a scientist in one specialty and he'll say, I know it's all problems here, but after all, they've got it proved in all the other areas. See, so you go to the other areas and you find that it's just as bad or worse. But the worst problem is none of these things that I've mentioned. The worst problem is that living organisms are full of complex operating systems that need a program to direct their operations. Everybody knows there has to be something instructing those billion proteins where to go and what to do. And the evolutionary science has no idea how to construct such a program, no mechanism at all.
The basic issue in psychology today revolves around the concept of soul, spirit, and mind. The atheistic, reductionistic position, by reduction here I mean you reduce the mind to the brain, you reduce the brain to matter, you reduce the matter to chemical elements and so forth, and you determine, the conclusion is man is simply matter in motion. From the Christian perspective, we argue that man is more than matter. Man is also mind, he's soul.
Unlike humanistic worldviews, which claim that guilt is the byproduct of evil social institutions, the biblical Christian worldview acknowledges the fallen nature of humans and the guilt that results from sinning against God.
If you believe that human beings are basically good and you overlook our fallen nature, then you focus simply on guilt feelings. And so humanistic psychologists, for example, don't try to address real guilt, but rather address guilt feelings. And those guilt feelings come from archaic social institutions like the family or the church, maybe outdated value systems as well. And so they address the feelings of guilt rather than real guilt itself. In contrast to that, the Christian perspective acknowledges the fallen nature of human beings, and we also want to address the feelings of guilt and the real guilt that may be behind those feelings of guilt as well. We recognize that real guilt comes from our failure to love God and love our neighbor. And so, in contrast to a humanistic perspective that says that we need to redefine or repress guilt and guilt feelings, the Christian perspective acknowledges human responsibility, it calls for repentance, and it seeks reconciliation with God and with human beings.
Every sociologist acknowledges the existence of certain social institutions, such as family, church, and government. Sociologists differ, however, when describing the origin of these institutions and their relationship to the individual. Whereas atheistic worldviews see humans as simply evolving animals, Christians believe that people are created in God's image.
One of the fundamental ways in which Christian sociology differs from humanistic approaches, whether Marxist, New Age, or simply atheistic, is its affirmation of individual freedom and responsibility. While humanistic approaches hold that society determines people's consciousness and actions, Christianity believes that while society does influence people, they have the freedom to choose between right and wrong, and to shape society.
Christian sociology values both the individual and society. People must recognize the consequences for the choices they make, both individually and corporately. They are ultimately answerable to God for the direction in which society is led through the institutions of family, church, and state.
As you just saw, the differences between humanistic thinking and biblical truth are like night and day. And the 5 topics we highlighted are just a few of the many aspects of our culture that have been infiltrated by secular humanism.
Sometimes this dominant worldview appears to be omnipresent, with buzzwords popping up everywhere. Consider these catchphrases: political correctness, sensitivity training, socialized medicine,
No-fault divorce, partial birth abortion, feminism, and a vast right-wing conspiracy. The list is endless, and that's why we believe every pro-moral citizen needs to understand and expose secular humanism for the lie that it really is.
In our next session, we'll explore America's godly heritage and uncover the beginnings of secular humanism in our country. Please join us for the continuation of this extremely important series.
I will guess that the one principle that was foremost in their mind was that government needed to be determined by the people who were being governed. And so in establishing the democratic process, they were seeking a government that the people who were being governed would have a say in.
I certainly wholeheartedly believe that America was founded on religious principles. You know, look at the documents that they created, that our founding forefathers created. Read it, and it's very clear that they certainly are founded on Christian principles, absolutely.
When we speak of America's godly heritage, we do so boldly and with great confidence. You see, there's a multitude of historical documents, recorded comments, and specific data that confirm the truth. This nation was founded on Christian principles and established by dedicated Christians, much like ourselves, who desired a homeland where they could practice their faith freely and without fear.
From the Mayflower Compact to the Declaration of Independence, America's founding years were steeped in Christ and Christianity. Although few would believe it today, the vast majority of colleges, including Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, were all created as public expressions of Christian faith.
That's right. America's educational, legal, and governmental systems were all based originally on a respect and reverence for God and the realization that man was His special creation.
Christians recognize that human government is a social institution established by God. Christians are called to obey it, even to support it. Romans 13:1 establishes how people should view the state. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Human governments are obligated to uphold justice, freedom, and order. America's founders understood fallen human nature. They also understood that humans were created in God's image. These two beliefs deeply affected how they established America's government system.
Good political philosophy takes into account that human beings are a fallen race, that they cannot be trusted to do the right thing, that in fact they can be trusted to do the wrong thing. They can be trusted to put self-interest before other interests. They can be trusted to seek their own pleasure, comfort, ease, and prosperity before seeking that which is good and true and beautiful. And prudent politics takes into account the fact that human beings have that sort of motivation.
Because of man's fallen nature, there was a need for checks and balances among the powers of the state. Thus, the founders designed American government in such a way that each of the branches of government has specific powers, and that these powers are counterbalanced by the other branches.
The Bible teaches us a political way of thinking that recognizes the authority of the state, but also recognizes the limits of the state. It teaches us that human beings are fallen, sinful, therefore that they need government, but that government itself, being composed of human beings, also needs government. That is, you must have some means of governing the governors. And this is what gave rise, for instance, in American history, to our separation of powers, to the federal system, where we have a federal government and state governments and county governments and city governments, where we have branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial. These all are designed to provide checks and balances, limitations to the expression of the sinfulness of man, even when he becomes a part of government. Because after all, as the founders recognized, passing the civil service exam does not suddenly make one instantaneously sanctified.
A government based on Christian principles will be able to retain basic human freedoms and protect basic human rights better than other forms of government. Today, human rights are under immense attack. There are many worldviews that deny the creation of humanity in God's image and deny the foundations of His laws. Many governments elevate the state at the expense of the individual, causing their citizens to suffer.
The Bible is very clear about our social responsibility. First of all, Jesus said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's." And in our particular form of government, in a federal republic, sometimes called a democracy, we can elect Caesar. So we have a special responsibility. We don't have to just obey governments. Romans 3 tell us that governments are ordained of God, that we're to obey and respect the government, but we can help elect the government. 1 Timothy chapter 2 tells us what kind of government we should work for, pray for, and elect. One that will lead to peace, justice, godliness, and an open door for the gospel. There are at least 4 characteristics listed there. And the kind of governments that will do that are the kind that we ought to promote, and the kinds that don't do that are the kinds that we ought to oppose.
A lot of Christians are somewhat negative on the concept of politics and what is entailed in the term. But the word politics simply means the rule of a city. And in a broader context, God rules the universe. And in fact, God created government. And government has to do with politics because it has to do with rulership. And the Bible makes it very clear that when the righteous are in authority or in rulership, the people rejoice. And when the ungodly are in authority, the people moan and groan.
So if we started out with such a strong biblical basis, with such a solid, firm foundation, how did we get where we are today? What happened? Well, believe it or not, it happened very gradually. First, through the educational system, the very place where we're to learn the fundamental tools of living. Now it provides tools for destruction, chaos, and ultimately death.
Education is the most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday schools, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? Charles Francis Potter.
Many people view secular humanism as mere fiction, dreamed up by the religious right. But it is not fiction, nor a dream, but very, very real. As we will see, secular humanists are quite open about their belief system and their goals. Books like the Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2, and publications like Free Inquiry and The Humanist openly proclaim the
good life, and also a cosmic outlook, interpreting nature in the light of the sciences. Is that religious? I don't think so.
Well, humanism is indeed a religion. It's the world's oldest religion, resting its case on the side of the serpent back in the Garden of Eden. So with all those ambiguous terms and word games used by the secular experts, is it really possible for regular folks to understand this man-centered belief system? Absolutely. Once the terms are clarified, any individual can not only understand it, but wholeheartedly reject it. To that end, here are the 5 basic tenets of humanism.
First is atheism. This is the foundation of all humanistic thought. The belief that there is no God. According to Paul Kurtz, no deity will save us. We must save ourselves. No matter which version of the Humanist Manifesto one reads, the message is always the same. Religious humanists, scientific or ethical humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. What the atheist expects us to believe is that effects can be achieved without causes and that design emerges without a designer. The truth is, neither the Christian nor the humanist can scientifically prove the existence or non-existence of God. We can, however, look around us and see evidence in one direction or another. For example, the 120 trillion brain connections in your head loudly proclaim a designer. So too do the mountains, oceans, rivers, and stars. They are dramatic effects that demand an adequate cause. Simply put, humanists can come up with no scientific proof for God's non-existence to counter the many evidences of His existence. Atheism is nothing more than a philosophical notion. Paul Kurtz is a philosopher, not a scientist. Certainly, atheism is not scientific fact. The truth is that thousands of top-notch scientists believe in the existence of God.
The second pillar is evolution. Basically, evolutionists want us to believe that a great miracle known as spontaneous generation happened 3.5 billion years ago, and that life, contrary to any observable scientific evidence, developed into higher and higher forms until man eventually appeared. Now, the funny thing is, this whole process of evolution demands a miracle. In fact, several miracles. According to Dr. Richard Bliss, a noted biology professor, the miracles required to make evolution feasible are far greater in number and far harder to believe than the miracle of creation. So our argument is this: if it takes a miracle either way, doesn't it seem more reasonable to believe that those miracles were performed by a miracle worker with infinite intelligence? It's clear, however, why humanists feel they must hang on to this theory. Remember, they reject belief in God and therefore have to explain man's existence independently of God. Unfortunately, this godless theory is fed to our public school children as fact.
This brings us to pillar number 3, amorality. You see, evolution has led naturally to the destruction of the moral foundation of this country. If you believe that man is an animal, you expect him to live like one. The definition of an amoral person is this: he denies a Bible-based morality and is completely without a conscience aware of God. In other words, his conscience is seared. Consequently, he's capable of inhumanity to man. If you're thinking that this is a little exaggerated or even implausible, Let me remind you of Germany's Third Reich. Euthanasia and genocide were common practices for them. And if you need a more modern-day example, let's turn to the glaring practice of abortion. This sanctioned medical procedure has already shed more blood than Hitler ever did. And who can deny that partial birth abortion is downright murder of the most defenseless members of human society? According to humanists, their practices of man-centered freedoms, which include the acceptance of sexual liberation and promiscuity, homosexuality, and abortion, should lead to a happy, fulfilling life. In contrast, scientific studies tell us that promiscuity leads to cancer, abortion may well lead to cancer, and homosexual activity leads to an early death. Indeed, the hallmarks of all morality are nothing more than disease, discouragement, and death. Humanist amorality leads directly to a moral freefall.
The fourth pillar of secular humanism is autonomous man. Autonomous means independent and self-governing. Humanists view man as a self-directed, godlike person with unlimited goodness and potential. For humanists, one of the worst sins is not the killing of unborn children. It's inhibiting the liberty and freedom of a human being to express himself. A major flaw in this thinking is based on the unscientific principle that man is basically good by nature. If man truly is innately good, then he ought to reflect that goodness in his daily life. Pick up a newspaper in this country or anywhere in the world. The front pages consistently proclaim that unrestrained man has a natural inclination toward crime, violence, and inhumanity. Clearly, man is in need of salvation and therefore a dependent creature. First, he's dependent on God, then on his fellow man. When secular humanists fail to recognize this fact, they cheat themselves in this life and in the eternity to come.
The fifth and final tenet is global socialism. Secular humanists absolutely love big government. They call it world government. They generally assume that government is good. In their eyes, the more there is, the better we are. History, in fact, shows us that freedom has always been enjoyed in inverse proportion to the size and power of the government. Generally speaking, when there is less government, there are more individual freedoms. Let's look at some of the classic failures of global socialism. There's Russia, China, Eastern Europe, Africa, Cuba, and the welfare state in America. This detrimental way of life offers no motivation to individuals, causing them to underproduce and plunging them into a second-rate existence. Here's a simple test to prove just how decisively socialism has faltered. How many people do you know who are clamoring to gain citizenship into a communist country? How many Americans do you see throwing inner tubes into the Atlantic Ocean and making a break for Cuba? Humanist-inspired socialism is, in fact, a scientific failure, just like every other basic article of faith believed by a secular humanist.
Now that you're familiar with the 5 basic tenets of humanism, our hope is to provide you with even more facts that will motivate you to expose and oppose this dangerous force in your city, your state, and even in the nation. Next time, we'll talk about how to wake the sleeping giant so that we as Christians can resume our rightful place in the arenas of politics, culture, and society itself.
The beliefs of secular humanism are widespread in America today, estimated to be the moral conviction of about 11% of the population. Most do not claim to be secular humanists and do not belong to a secular humanist organization, yet they hold to the basic beliefs of the secular humanist worldview. In his essay, Religious Freedom and the Challenge of Modern Pluralism, sociologist James Davison Hunter notes that most scholars recognize the secular character of public life and the fact that there is a growing constituency who favor these circumstances. One could argue quite plausibly that secular humanism has become the dominant moral ideology of American public culture, and now plays much the same role as the pan-Protestant ideology played in the 19th century.
This is really at the heart of the ideology that created what I have called the naked public square, a public square that is completely devoid of any religious referent or of any moral reference that is grounded in religion.
We have a public discourse having to do with politics and the moral life of people without any reference to God. Somehow or other, God has been taken away from just ordinary common discussion of our country's problems.
As secular humanism has gradually gained influence over American culture, its champions have almost unanimously described themselves as promoters of a new religion, a religion more highly evolved than, as John Dunphy called it, the rotting corpse of Christianity.
Well, we hope that got your attention. You see, it's time for all of us to face up to the fact that humanists really do control America. According to my friend, Dr. James Dobson, the secular humanistic system of values has now become the predominant way of thinking in most of the power centers of society.
Our purpose in this session is to rouse and awaken Christians and pro-moral Americans from slumber toward action. The truth is, this great nation of ours is being ruled by a small but very influential group of committed humanists. Under the guise of democracy, these politicians and academics are determined to turn America into an amoral, humanist country that will fit right in with a one-world government.
Here's the breakdown. The federal government consists of 537 elected officials, 435 representatives, 100 senators, a president, and a vice president. Now, not all of those 537 are humanists, but as a whole, they've supported humanistic goals so often that we're truly on the verge of moral collapse in our country. Just check out the website of the Democratic Socialists of America. You'll find that 55 members of Congress are currently listed on the DSA site, some of whom are leading voices in the Democratic Party.
Morality is a very low priority with many of these public officials. Take, for example, one current issue on the political landscape. If humanists, along with their powerful homosexualist friends, succeed in forcing the pro-moral majority to accept homosexuality as normal behavior, 2,000 years of Western culture and more than 300 years of American history will go up in smoke. Every American must realize that something is amiss when Boy Scout troops are expelled from public schools and the homosexual agenda is promoted. And you can rest assured that once homosexuals win their case, the legalizing of prostitution, pedophilia, drugs, gambling, and who knows what else is soon to follow.
In addition to finding influential humanists in government, we can also find them in a myriad of active organizations and many societies. Recognize any of these names: Americans for Democratic Action, National Council of Churches, International League of Working Women, the American Ethical Union,
the Sex Information and Educational Council of the United States, the National Organization of Women, the National Education Association, and of course the American Civil Liberties Union. It's also important to note that humanist leaders founded and continue to direct the United Nations, UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Health Organization.
Certainly the most effective humanist organization for destroying the laws, morals, and traditional rights of Americans is the aforementioned ACLU, founded in 1919 by socialists and members of the Communist Party. Their activities include, but are not limited to, legal defense for those who supported Fidel Castro, tenacious opposition to voluntary prayer and Bible reading in the public schools, efforts to delete the words "under God" from the Pledge of Allegiance, and tireless opposition to laws forbidding pornography, abortion, homosexuality, and even pedophilia. You can thank the ACLU for changing Easter to spring break, Christmas to winter vacation, and deeming Christmas programs that feature Santa, Rudolph, and Scrooge to be perfectly acceptable, while the celebration of Christ's birth is absolutely out.
Now, if all of this isn't enough to cause great concern, consider two more powerful vehicles, the media and the arts. Whether it's talk shows or movies, newspapers or newscasts, these arenas have a definite slant toward leftist and statist views and against Judeo-Christian conservative values. One doesn't have to look long or hard to see this distinct bias. It's dominant and relentless.
So, even though the situation may look grim, all is not lost. If pro-moral, Bible-believing citizens become as active and vocal as their humanistic counterparts have been, we have the same resources and tools available to us that secularists have been using against us to advance their cause for the last 100 years. Let's take a brief look at how we could begin to turn back the negative effects of this humanistic faith in our schools and reclaim the classroom for our children.
Students who accept this faith are thrust into selfishness, godlessness, and moral relativism. Why must students constantly be on their guard against this assault on values? Surely the most basic role of the state, promoting justice, requires the state to treat citizens fairly, rather than forcing one religion on every citizen. Every thinking individual, consciously or unconsciously, adheres to a worldview. Worldviews form the foundation from which we interpret and understand the world. Every worldview proposes values that motivate the adherent. Thus, teachers cannot completely separate their values from the content of their teaching. Value-neutral education is a myth. How can we as Christians and citizens reclaim this ground? When we recognize this value-neutral hoax, we should simultaneously realize the basic unfairness of a policy that bans only those religions with explicitly absolute values from the classroom. Instead of discriminating against Christianity and other traditional religions, the government should open the doors and allow knowledgeable proponents of both theistic and atheistic worldviews in the public schools, in the courts, and in the various government agencies. Such a policy, though imperfect, at least allows the U.S. government to establish an even-handed approach with regards to religions. If Carl Sagan's series Cosmos is shown in public schools, then creationist Dr. A.E. Wilder Smith's Origins must be allowed. If ethical relativism is taught, then ethical absolutes must be addressed as well.
We can't have a monopoly philosophy in the public schools anymore.
What can the theistic Sunday schools, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching?
I believe that we must do everything we can to equip our teenagers, our children, to know, live, and defend God's truth.
A new policy of fairness and even-handedness with regards to religion is not implausible. If a sufficient number of dedicated Christians, ministers, and other pro-moral Americans use their influence, energy, and resources, we can return the humanists to private life and replace them with those who truly represent our nation and its best interests. In point of fact, they only represent, at the most, 6% of the American public.
In our sixth and final session, we're going to share specific, practical, and powerful suggestions for accomplishing this task. Don't miss it. It could change your city, your state, and hopefully your nation. We'll see you next time. This may be the most important session of our series, Mind Siege, the Battle for Truth in the New Millennium. Welcome, everyone. I'm Tim LaHaye.
And I'm David Noebel. We hope that after studying the first 5 sessions, you're saying to yourself, enough is enough. I'm ready to get in the ballgame. Every single one of you can effectively partner with God and with your fellow believers to oppose the dangerous agenda of secular humanism.
Christianity and Christians have a lot to say about the great ideas that inform the mind and move the heart. We must not stay silent when we step outside the 4 walls of our churches. To do so is not in line with biblical or historical Christianity. Remember, what humanists call rights, the church consistently calls wrongs. Therefore, if we fail to get involved politically on moral issues, humanists will pollute our land.
Specifically, Christians should raise their voices from their homes, churches, and places of business whenever matters come up regarding abortion, homosexuality, pornography, prostitution, gambling, infanticide, euthanasia, parents' rights, drugs, world government, and religious or secular humanism. If pro-moral Americans would consistently speak out and vote on these issues, there's no doubt that we could return our nation to moral self-respect and decency.
So, what specifically do we mean when we say speak out, stand up, and take action? Here are some short and long-term strategies for you to consider. Number 1, know your biblical Christian worldview. We touched on this in the first session of our series. A worldview is any set of ideas or beliefs that speaks to a theology, philosophy, ethics, biology, psychology, sociology, law, economics, political history, and so on. It's impossible to defeat a secular worldview with no worldview of your own. Make every effort to be knowledgeable and clear on how your biblical belief system is integrated into all areas of your life.
Number 2, pray. Let me direct you to 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Although you've probably prayed for America many times, we'd like to encourage you to specifically go before the Lord on behalf of the 16 people that you elect to office. This is not as overwhelming as it may sound. You only elect 5 people nationally, 5 in your state, 6 locally. Your taxes pay their salaries, and their decision-making will affect your children's lives. So pray for them.
Number 3, share your faith. About half of this nation's 80 million evangelicals share their faith once a week. 5 million do so once or more daily. If the rest of the evangelicals would do the same, we could easily solve the moral problems of our age by sheer numbers of converts. The new millennium provides an unprecedented opportunity for Christians to share their belief in Christ. Humanism has brought about so much moral anarchy that people are looking for something real to believe in. In Christ, we have the answer. Let's not keep him to ourselves.
Number 4, protect your children. According to Charles Colson, the naturalistic view of life pervades every area of Western culture, but nowhere with greater effect than among young people. Be diligent to keep your children involved in church activities, Bible studies, Christian youth events, biblically based summer camps, and family devotions. In this cosmic struggle, you must not lose your children to the forces of darkness.
Number 5, read, read, read. This is a biblical instruction. According to 2 Timothy 2:15, you must study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. According to author George Barna, almost half of all adults do not read even one book during a typical year. We're challenging each of you to turn off the TV for a few hours every day and begin reading some of the selections listed in your workbook. You can rest assured that the information you receive by way of television will be slanted toward humanism.
Number 6, help in the campaign of pro-moral candidates. Volunteer workers are the most significant factor in winning elections on all levels, and that's often where Christians are the weakest. We must realize that a few weeks of work on behalf of the right candidate could save hours and years of future turmoil. Another point we'd like to make is that Christians seriously err when they insist that a candidate be a committed Christian before he's worthy of their support. We need elected officials who are sincerely committed to moral principles with the character to stand up for them. And here's an additional word of caution. Ignore what the candidates say and carefully examine what they do. Remember, a professional politician will say anything to get elected. His voting record speaks more loudly than his rhetoric. Again, our only hope is that the silent, pro-moral majority will become militant about their morality and elect leaders of conviction and character to public office. If we're diligent in exercising our right to vote, we could see a rebirth of moral and spiritual sanity.
Number 7, consider running for public office yourself. Now, certainly God doesn't want 80 million of us running for public office, but He could use about 200,000. Don't shy away from the possibility. You should start by identifying your moral convictions. After that, evaluate the office, the need, your speaking ability, and the group of friends who would be willing to help you. Start with small offices, like the school board, and work your way up. It's definitely something to pray about.
Number 8, join pro-moral organizations. As we showed you in the previous study session, humanists are active in a myriad of organizations that further their causes and convictions. We must do the same. Please consider becoming active in a local, state, or national pro-moral organization. Remember, the entire moral tone of the new millennium will be determined either by the feminist, humanist, homosexuals, and liberals, or by the pro-moral, pro-American Christians. The choice is yours, and the outcome is up to you.
Number 9, speak out and write vigorously on moral issues. Here's what we've discovered about Christians' political actions during the past year. Only 9% sent a letter to a company protesting their ethics. Only 41% contacted a public official to express their opinion. And only 37% attended a community meeting on local issues. This is a day of wide-open pressure politics, and government leaders cannot be deaf to their constituents. Unfortunately, the high-pressure tactics of the humanists have given our leaders the impression that they speak for the majority, when just the opposite is usually true. The only way to change that is to write concise, kind, respectful, but forthright letters explaining your reasons for favoring or opposing certain legislation or government activities.
Number 10, fund good, pro-moral, pro-family causes. Another way to say this is, put your money where your heart is. It takes an enormous amount of money to fight amoral, government-backed, foundation-sponsored programs and legislation. Please consider giving whatever you can afford to support pro-moral groups like Concerned Women for America, Eagle Forum, Prison Fellowship, Focus on the Family, Family Research Council, even Summit Ministries. Certainly there are many others. Give where you believe the Lord is directing you.
Hopefully, these 10 suggestions have given you a concrete and clear path to take as you seek to be about the Father's business. Make no mistake, the only way we'll be able to reclaim our country and our culture is through hard work, as in blood, sweat, and tears.
Let's not be fooled. If we refuse to engage in the battle, we stand to lose it all. Our families, our churches, our country, even our civilization. Remember, tens of thousands have already lost their children to humanist education and Hollywood's pop culture. Churches are already under the gun for speaking out against abortion, homosexuality, pornography, and gambling.
Concerned friends, with your help, there's a way to turn the tide, but it will take vision, courage, and vigilance. As James Russell Lowell reminds us, once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. Then it is the brave man chooses while the coward stands aside. We hope the information you've learned in these study sessions will be valuable ammunition in your daily efforts. The victory is ours if we remain faithful and fight the good fight. And now, dear friends, to the battle for the hearts and minds of the American people. And on behalf of David and myself, we would like to say, may God richly bless you, and God bless America.